Thanks everybody for coming. I see a few new faces. Okay, one. And then I see some new ones online. So thanks for those online that are joining us today for the AVL Virtual Reality Workshop Series. Today we're going to be talking about developing for mobile virtual reality experiences. Tomorrow, oh sorry, forgot, we have the bonus VR expeditions on select Mondays in this same room here in Franklin Hall 052. And the next one is going to be February 25th. Chauncey Friend will be doing creative tools in virtual reality. So please come by. And then tomorrow at the Services for Digital Humanities and Creative Activities workshop in the Wells Scholars Commons, we have Bernie Fisher coming to talk about Rome Reborn. So please attend that. There's a lot of great things that Bernie's done with his Rome digitization work. As I said, today we'll be talking about developing for mobile virtual reality experiences. Thank you, Bill, for setting this up. A little bit about me. I have about 20 years experience on developing for virtual reality applications. I did develop and deploy an application to the Apple App Store. Unfortunately for you, you're going to hear quite a bit about that today. So I hope Chauncey doesn't go to sleep because he lived through it with me. I have developed several tablet and mobile applications that we use internally, meaning I don't deploy them to the App Store. Instead, I just deploy them to our local devices. And then I am the lead Apple iOS developer for the AVL. And I say that loosely because I'm not really an iOS developer. Today we're going to be talking about what is mobile virtual reality, and then we'll go into some of the applications that you could use if you wanted to deploy something to the App Store or just deploy an internal app to your device. I'm going to touch on web development tools so you can deploy virtual reality for mobile devices over the internet. And then I'm going to delve into my experience developing an application for the Apple App Store. So what is mobile virtual reality? So a lot of people would argue that it's not really virtual reality because of the lack of tracking that's involved with a mobile device. In the beginning, mobile virtual reality was basically slipping your phone inside of something like a Google Cardboard. So there's no tracking on this device. There is just the phone gyroscopic effect itself. Now we have some dedicated portable devices. I don't have it, well, no, I'm not going to show that one. Dedicated portable HMD devices like the Oculus Go. The Oculus Go is also a 3 degree of freedom tracking device. However, mobile VR is starting to change. I think it's this month or next month, the Oculus Quest is going to be released, which is also going to be a dedicated mobile virtual reality device. However, the Oculus Quest is going to bring in full 6 degree of freedom tracking. So that means it's not only going to track where you look, but it's also going to track your hands with a couple controllers, just like the Vive or the full Oculus. And it's also going to track where you move in the room using SLAM tracking or inside out tracking from the Oculus Quest itself. So the point here is that this might be the last time I talk about just mobile virtual reality and its limitations, because soon mobile virtual reality will have all the functionality of what we would call in desktop virtual reality, except you'll just have to worry about lower polygon counts, lower memory usage on mobile devices. So for today's presentation, we're going to stick with what we call traditional mobile virtual reality, which is where you have a lack of tracking. You're just doing 3 degrees of freedom. So all I can do is track where a person is gazing. And then our interface is relatively limited as well. I did not put these in order, maybe in order of the fact that magnetic switch was one of the first interactions you could do with a Google Cardboard. It wasn't very functional. I programmed it and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Capacitive touch, that's how the new Google Cardboard works and a lot of these other devices I have on the table here. Gaze selection is the one that is probably the most common because gaze selection works on all mobile virtual reality devices, and you can even transfer gaze selection into a desktop virtual reality application as well. It's a little bit annoying because usually it means you're staring at a particular object for a certain period of time before something happens. There's a touchpad on some of the HMDs. The Gear VR I have here, there's a little touchpad. So if you're a Marvel Comics fan, you can play like your Cyclops and constantly tap the side of your head to zap things. And then, of course, our external controllers. I brought one that we have. This one works with Android devices. It's a Steel series. I've had mixed results with these as well. Bill, have you had success with them?
I haven't used it in a couple years since buying.
Yeah, they seem to drop their connection quite a bit with a phone compared to like a Bluetooth headset. So some of the app development tools. So again, when I talk about app development, I'm talking about you're deploying an encapsulated application to either the stores or just directly to your internal device. So here's just a sampling of what we can do. We have Unity highlighted in green because that's the one the Advanced Visualization Lab officially supports for the IU community. If you want to do Unreal, you're welcome to it. We just wouldn't be able to help you as much. We've installed Unreal on some of our reality stations. And if you want to use that for developing mobile VR, that's fine. The source code solutions, you could go use Apple's Xcode with Objective-C. I think Objective-C technically has a dash there, so I may have that misspelled wrong. And then you can use the Android development kit as well. This is just a sampling of some things that we've done or that you can do with Unity. There is a very large community for Unity. I think that community is probably still larger than Unreal the last time I checked. There are tons of assets on the Unity store to help you build your application. I did use some of those assets, as you'll see later in this presentation. And then just today, I found out from, you, Dave? Somebody, that you can get plugins like Google Poly for the Unity from the Unity Asset Store. And you name the device and Unity probably supports it. Cardboards, Gear VR, I used a VR1 in my case. Now we're going to talk about an area where I'm not as much of an expert, but fortunately I have Dave Reagan in the room who is going to be my resident expert, and that's using web development tools to deploy to your mobile virtual reality devices. Now WebVR has a lot of advantages over submitting something to the App Store or even doing it locally. The first advantage is you can update your content on the web server, and that updates it for all users out there. You don't have to go through the process of grabbing all your internal devices and updating them, or even deploying it in some fashion over a store or some network. It's just one server, update it, and you're ready to go. You don't have to be a developer in a community. So for those that know are Apple developers, you know, you pay $99 a year so that you can become an Apple developer. Now in the IU community, they have a system where you can become an Apple developer without joining, or at least they used to. They may not support it anymore. But you just write web code. You don't have to be a part of a community. It's potentially open to more platforms. That's possibly up to debate. It eliminates the reliance on proprietary tools to retrieve or update your data. What I mean by that is, if you're using Unity or Unreal to develop your application, and let's say 10 years down the road, Unity folds shop, how are you going to update your application? Can you even open your environment anymore, and can you update it? But with a web tool, you theoretically have forever. As long as web browsers exist, you'll be able to open your data and be able to read your data. You can still abstain. A lot of people worry about, well, how am I going to get my costs back? Well, you can add a portal to the front of your web server that makes people pay for a membership, if that's one of the things you're worried about is cost recovery. However, web deployment does require a server, of course, and requires internet connectivity, although I'm not 100% positive you always need internet connectivity. Can you download an app and take it with you?
Yeah, there's kind of a new standard called progressive web apps, where as long as somebody has opened it once, it can save that.
Okay.
Run it in offline.
All right, so Dave says there's a new concept called progressive web apps, so that you can download the app and take it with you. All right. This is, again, just a sampling of the web development tools that are available. A-Frame is one Dave has introduced me to, and it's all HTML based, is that right? And JavaScript, okay. HTML based and JavaScript. X3D, Eric is very familiar with X3D. It's been around for a long time. You can go to the Web3D consortium and see some examples to download. WebGL, I don't recommend starting with WebGL. It's pretty low level. As a person who suffered through WebGL programming myself, I don't want to go through that experience again, and I wouldn't recommend other people going through it. Google Expedition is a tool that you can create spherical walkthroughs. Our colleague in Digital Humanities, Tassie Nady, has done this, and she's done it with a limestone tour. You can find that by going to Google Poly, and linking up a limestone tour, and you can experience that with your mobile device. 3GS is another one. Now, Mozilla Hubs, the reason I have an asterisk next to it, I wouldn't exactly call that a developer tool. However, as a research support specialist, we have many people that come to us and all they really want to do is bring their environment into virtual reality and bring a couple things into it. They aren't worried about making custom interactions or anything like that. So recently we tested Mozilla Hubs. Oh, I guess I should, yeah.
So you said you prefer not to do WebGL. Why would someone want to overcome whatever hurdles are there to do WebGL?
It is a good question. I'm not sure. It's pretty low level, WebGL. I'm sorry. The question is, why would somebody want to go and program with WebGL over some of the other tools? And I'm not sure I know the answer to that, Bill, unless you really want to go low level with your programming and do like OpenGL programming, because that's essentially what WebGL. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for letting. Where were you when I did some WebGL work about 5 or 10 years ago? So I'll talk briefly about an example of A-frame that Dave Reagan did with Enrico Vesperini. Is that correct? And Jeremy Webb. They have this example of life inside a globular cluster where they have a simulated globular cluster of stars, and you can go to this planet and you can get sued by George Lucas because you have BB-8 in your scene, and then you can look around and change the environment. It's a pretty cool application, and one thing I found surprising is it doesn't work on a Vive, right? It's not been made to work on a Vive. Okay. Okay, I wasn't able to get it to work on a Vive, but it does work on my iPhone, which anything that works on an iPhone, that's a big step forward. So those screen captures you see up there are from my own iPhone. You're right, I couldn't get that menu to go away, but still, we'll talk about some of the other people that have done VR. Yeah, yeah. Is it Disney? Disney sues you now. You're right. That's a good point. Thanks for keeping me up. keep me up to date. I talked a little bit about Tassie's work. This is her limestone tour there. I did put the link in there for people to go directly to it and experience it. And this, I know it's a little deja vu from our architectural discussion last week. And this is a Mozilla Hubs test that we recently did. Now, it was buggy. You go into Mozilla Hubs and you can create a room. Dave did this for us, and he took a photogrammetrized version of our next lab up in Indianapolis, and then we met there. Now, I was using a Lenovo Explorer, and it worked fine for me. Bill was on a laptop. He wasn't at VR. Dave was using an HTC Vive, correct? And in case you can't tell in this image, Dave is sad. It was not working for Dave for some reason. It was also a little clunky for me, but I think there's going to be improvements. I'm hopeful. Yeah, Andres.
So if you join Mozilla Hubs with a Vive, do you open a browser?
Yeah, so you open a web browser and then you say enter VR, and then it sends the rendering into the Vive. So you have to have VR running.
Yeah, so the I got to repeat the question. Yeah. So the question was, how do you fire up Mozilla Hubs in VR? So you have to have a VR device. Obviously, in this case, we're using HTC Vive as an example. You would open up Steam VR, have Steam VR running. You would go to the Hubs website. So just Google Hubs Mozilla, and it'll take you there. And you have to be using Firefox, right? Yes. Yes. You'll be required to download the latest version of Firefox. And then once you download that version, go to Hubs, have Steam VR running, then you can click on, I think it's an icon, or no, it just says enter room. Yeah. Yeah, big buttons you can't miss. It's almost like childlike buttons. They're huge. And it'll guide you through getting in VR. Right? Yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about my experience developing an application for the Apple App Store. And this is where Chauncey should have, his name should be a bunch of Z's right now, because Chauncey felt the pain as I went through this, and he was developing his pipes experience. So Visiball 360 VR was intended to be a 360 spherical image viewer. However, it didn't start that way. Despite my incredible youthful appearance with my stable hairline and my gray beard, I'm not as youthful as I look. I'm getting older, and so I have a bucket list of items I want to do, and that's what this all started with was I wanted to do a video game for the Apple App Store. Along the way, I was in this video game, I was going to allow people to load their own spherical images. It was just one of the concepts of the video game that I thought would make it fun. However, at the same time, the AVL was producing a spherical image viewer for statewide IT. So I took the opportunity to jump on that project just to learn how I could do this. And in about 8 to 16 hours, I was able to generate a decent prototype that you were able to look at our spherical images of Big Red and some of our other supercomputing infrastructure. And I thought, well, this is going to be easy. I'll have this on the App Store in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. I was wrong about that. This takes a long time to load because it actually has the real images in it. So I created my own goals and specifications. This was my project. This has nothing to do with Indiana University. It's something that I just wanted to do on my own. And I wanted to be future forward. At the time, I think spherical images from a Ricoh Theta were about 3,700 by 1,800 pixels or something like that. I knew that we were going to have higher resolution imagery coming in the future, so I called it future forward, and it had to be able to support 8K by 8K images or 16K by 4K. That would be 8K by 8K, 1:1 aspect ratio is a stereoscopic pair over and under when you're using equirectangular mapping. 4:1 aspect ratio, or the 16K by 4K, would also be two equirectangular images next to each other, and then 2:1 is just going to be a mono image. But I knew in my mind at the time a lot of people use squeezed stereo, so I did have a little manual plans for a manual override. The big thing I wanted to do was allow people to create their own slideshow experiences. A lot of people have spherical images and they want to go and make maybe your vacation or go through your dream home. And so that was very hard to do. All the apps I saw in the App Store were very subpar. They didn't do that. And even today, we're working with things like Google Expeditions, where it's a tool that you created. I just wanted you to make your own slideshows. I wanted to go to Android and iOS deployment, and I had to support several HMD formats or HMD mount systems. I also wanted the interface to be very easy for people to look at, to understand what the icons did, because all the other spherical apps that I downloaded were just terrible. Even one, I'm just going to call them out, a company called, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Homido, H-O-M-I-D-O. They had a little HMD. You could buy it at Best Buy. Their app was terrible. It didn't make any sense. The buttons were really tiny. And so this is a sampling of the icons that I used. And some of them were a success and some of them were pretty stupid so in retrospect. So the ones I'm happy with are, obviously that's phone viewing mode with the iPhone image and then a head mounted display. Can I hide this, Bill? Oops. How about you go back? There we go. How do I hide this? There we go. All right. Sorry about that. All right. But some of the icons that I in retrospect, were pretty stupid, or kind of what I call developer icons. And it's probably these two here in the middle is because as I'm developing this thing to work with all these different devices, they have the capacitive zones in different locations on all of these devices. So I was using this as almost a reference to me that, okay, for the ViewMaster, its capacitive zone is down here. For the Google Cardboard, its capacitive zone was up there. And I just happened to have some interface items right in the middle of the screen as well, because that's where you hide a lot of things from users, right in the middle, in between the two eyes. So some of my icons I think were great, some of them not so well done. The tools that I used, all this stuff I bought myself. So remember, this is not an IU project. So I had to get this stuff myself. I wanted to make it a full experience that I was doing it from beginning to middle and the end. I bought my own MacBook. I did subscribe to Unity. Bought some assets from the Unity store. I did use Rhino, purchased my own version of Rhino, and some other software on here as well. Some of these are really good if you're a student and you're going out in the wild and you don't have the money to buy your own Photoshop and you're a Mac user. Acorn is a really good product. It was $30 and it did everything I would need to do in Photoshop. So here were my costs. Now these costs aren't, I'm not a businessman. I knew I'd have to throw up there, so somebody's going to ask me. The red asterisk next to Unity, I really didn't have to buy Unity. I wanted to, because there was just a couple of features of Unity that I wanted that cost me money. One of them was the custom splash screen. I know a lot of people are going to laugh. You spent $400 for your own custom splash screen. Yeah, I did. All right. So maybe that's arrogant, but I just didn't want that Unity logo coming up. I wanted it to be my own personal logo coming up. I did mention it was a middle-age crisis, didn't I? And then I bought some other assets from both the Unity store. I got some free stuff from GitHub. Okay, so this is one where people may start to laugh at me. I am not a 2D artist, and I never will be a 2D artist. I'm terrible with Illustrator and all these 2D tools out there. However, I have extensive experience in 3D modeling. So all of the icons that you see in this application were actually 3D models that were rendered out into 2D sprites on the screen. So you can see my trash can here. Yeah, I actually modeled it. The good news is I find 3D modeling relaxing, so it was time well spent. The other advantage, for what it's worth, if you do 3D model your models that you're going to render to sprites, if you're not happy with the certain rotation of the object, all you got to do is go back to your model, rotate it a little bit, and change it. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
In hindsight, would you rather recommend something like SketchUp to do 3D, like something that's a little simpler?
The question is, would I recommend something like SketchUp for doing the 3D models for render to sprite? I can't say I would, and I think I would say no. I wouldn't recommend using a 3D modeler for creating your sprites. I just happen to be a 3D modeler, and I happen to be a person that loves Rhino. So, and I knew how to render with Rhino into a PNG that would have alpha in the background. Honestly, I think most people make their sprites using 2D tools, like with Adobe Illustrator. I don't know what they use because I'm not a 2D guy. Does that answer? All right. So the biggest snag I hit, and this is the part that became painful, but also let me revisit my roots as a computer scientist, was the memory overflow. So I had bought a $15 set of code from a guy in Japan from the Unity Asset Store, and this code did one thing. It would allow me to pick images off of my iPhone and load them into my Unity scene. Well, it worked great if your images didn't go over 512 pixels by 512 pixels. And then when you hit 1,000 by 1,000, it would start to crash. So I had to use Apple Instruments and start tracing what was happening to the code because it was crashing all the time. I contacted the developer, and he told me it was impossible to load anything larger than a 1K by 1K image onto an iPhone. One thing I've learned working as research support, you never tell a faculty member or a graduate student, no, it's not possible. There is no, it's not possible. It's just time and money. So I started to look into his code and figure out how he was loading the image, because I already knew my phone could load an 8K image. It's right there. And I knew there was overhead from Unity, but how much of that overhead is going to cause a memory crash? That's what I had to look into. Well, it turns out, and I'm not going to mention his name, his code, he was copying the image 3 times as he was loading it, and he was transforming it to get it formatted for Unity. So I had to go and look at his Objective-C code, and I did everything that he was going to do in Unity 3 times, and I did it 1 time in Objective-C. And that broke me going to Android. I could have still gone to Android, but by the time I spent figuring out what he had done and how he had copied the images over, I was done coding for a long time. I was proud of it, don't get me wrong, but this was a significant amount of effort, a lot of head banging. It's hard to see in this, but this is pretty much all commented out. That's his original C# code, and then this is the some of the fresh Objective-C code that I put in there to fix the memory overflow problem. Then I went into a testing phase. For those that haven't deployed to an app store, I don't know what Android's like, but I'm sure it's similar. You use something, they call it the Apple Connect store now. It used to be called iTunes Connect. And you can create a test version. You can have up to 100 different beta testers. And I gave it to, I think, 10 different people, including Gary Moats, Mike Boyles, and just about any iPhone user I saw. I would say, hey, you want to be a beta tester? Put it through extensive testing. I did test 8K by 8K images and 16K by 4K, and I used my iPhone 6S at the time. And I was really pleased when I used an old iPhone 5S that was laying around and it still worked. And that's when I knew, I think I'm ready to deploy it to the App Store. So I submitted it to the App Store in 2016, September. So if you do the math, I started in 2015. It was probably about 10 to 11 months worth of development. It was a very busy time. I didn't know it was going to be that much work. I had my laptop out at wrestling practice, softball practice, everywhere you could. I was the guy in the corner with his laptop out. I released it for 99 cents. I will say this little tiny green dot here, for those that have submitted something to the App Store, that's a big deal. You know, you submit it and it's yellow and it says under review. And I get these images of a bunch of people going, oh, this is the greatest app ever. You know, like the kid in Christmas Story that wrote the greatest story ever about the Red Ryder. It's pretty uneventful. It just one day that comes up and says you're ready to sell it. It was the best 360 viewer for iOS, though. I can say that with the utmost confidence in September of 2016. So you can prove me wrong, but I don't think you'll be able to. So this is my sales over 2.5 years. So this is September 2016. Can anybody guess when I changed the price from 99 cents to free? So up to this point, this is about 100 and something units sold. And a year later for a celebration, I just said, forget it, I'm done. I sold 120 for 99 cents. Oh wait, one thing I do want to say. What's cool about Apple is they tell you where the units were sold, down to the city even. And I sold a surprising number in Moscow and some other locations that I didn't expect. Every continent except for Antarctica and Australia. Now, I get Antarctica. What's up with Australia? Not one copy, not even free, not one copy. And ironically, on my bucket list is to visit Australia. It kind of makes me think maybe I won't go to Australia. But on the same note, anybody listening, if you happen to have a VPN in Australia and you haven't downloaded Visiball, just do me a solid. Go get it from Australia for me. I made $84. Okay, not made. The business people would get on me for that. I recovered $84 or I lost $1,900. I never really did it for the money, but I'll admit, I thought I was going to make more than $84. I was almost thinking I'd get into the 4-digit region, but I didn't even get close. I've had about 1,700 total units moved. And the cool thing is it's still in the App Store. The website is no longer functioning. So if you try it in the app, try to go to the website for help or to download some images, no, $84 covered 1 year for the website. So you can forget it, I'm done. But it still runs on iOS 12. Every time there's an iOS update, first thing I do is update and see if it still runs. Yeah.
What was your experience with reviews? Like, did you get any nasty reviews from people?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. The question was, what was my experience with reviews? Nothing. Not one review. I was so upset that I wanted a nasty review. I wanted somebody to say, your app sucks. And I was going to say, well, it was the best in September of 2016. Where were you? Not one person reviewed it. And I did have an email link inside the app where you could ask for help and it would go to my website and all this fancy stuff and you fill out a form. And I think it actually opened your own the email client for Apple. And I got one email one time with no contents in the email, just titled what I had called it. And I responded, can I help you? No, nobody was interested. So the goals, my original goals. So the red one here, streaming at the top. I did have a streaming functionality in the original version of Visiball, and it worked with YouTube and a lot of other websites as well. I just got nervous. I thought, this is not worth it. I'm going to make $100. Well, I thought I was going to make a few $100 back, and it just wasn't worth somebody saying, hey, you can't stream your content through your app, our content through your application. So I removed that functionality from it. It was kind of clunky anyway, to be honest with you. You had to paste a URL into it. And then Android, I was just exhausted by the end of it, and I didn't want to go through what I went through with Objective-C with Android development as well. So it wasn't like I was going to make a lot of money, so I just forgot about Android. Well, lessons learned, purchase assets might not work for you, so don't believe everything you see. I even offered my code to the gentleman that sold me the $15. I was like, hey, I fixed your code. And he didn't believe me. He said, that's not possible. You can't load an AK by AK on an iPhone. And I was like, yeah, you can. But I didn't get into a fight with him. Unity does bloat your app size. So I made fun of a lot of the other spherical image viewers, but they were all way smaller than mine. We're talking about 10 to 20 megabyte downloads. Mine was about a 200 megabyte download. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to make your app really thin, or you want people to be able to download it out in the field. If you use something like Unreal or Unity, it's going to bloat the size of the application. And I did thin it out. It was 400 megabytes in the beginning, and I tried to find the components of Unity that I didn't need and remove those. And of course, since I went ahead and had to do Objective-C, which is what I was trying to avoid using Unity, I often wondered if I should have just started from Objective-C in the first place and saved myself some money. Maybe not time. The App Store deployment. So I took this seriously. This was my name on this product, and I dotted my I's, crossed my T's, went through all the legal documentation, and I was just trembling when I was clicking yes and no to accepting taxes from Japan and all this, and put the app out there, went through review, and I thought, wow, I did it right. I'm really skeptical what the review is. I think they look at an app and go, yeah, and let it go, because right about a month after I released it, if you recall, there was national news about fake bank apps on the Apple App Store. So I don't know if it was Chase Bank or something. It wasn't really Chase Bank, and people are punching in their passwords and username and password into it. And I thought, they didn't review my app. They just looked at it and said, what's it do? Okay, let it go. I did have a version 2 in mind for a while. I have conquered the 8K by 4K. It's a pretty easy thing to do, to be honest with you. And I did it for an internal application for Indiana University. But the reality is I was pretty much done by this point. So Visiball is now, development ceased. The advantage of using 3D for your icons is displayed here. And that bucket list item's off my list. Thanks to Dave and Eric and all the people that helped with some of the footage I put up today. All right, any questions? Yeah.
For someone at very beginning stages like myself, how would you suggest I get started? Watch Linda videos or just start diving in?
I think the question is, if you're brand new to this, to development, is that what you're saying? Yeah, if you're brand new to development in general, how would you dive into this? Now, are you talking just mobile VR or VR in general? Yeah, VR in general. I think you have to do a self-assessment first, right? If you're not a programmer, then I think you're going to need to utilize some kind of tool. If you think you're capable of watching Linda videos and learning how to write Objective-C, and that's where you're at, I would start there. I think it gives you a good understanding. But honestly, I think the vast majority of people won't start there. They would start with a higher level tool like Unity or Unreal, and you'll get results much faster. And if you're not planning to sell it or anything like that, that's probably the easiest route. Dave, do you have any comment on the web development tools in that regard if you're brand new to programming?
Haven't done simple web development like that, then I would probably advocate it also.
Any questions on?
I asked the Zoom people if they had questions. Oh, here comes one. George Takahashi.
Oh, that was not George Turner. It was George. Oh, it was George.
I asked for clarification once I realized.
Sorry, George. Got the Georges confused.
Do you know of any resource for non-physically testing across the various Android OS versions, or do you find it sufficient for testing on a handful of physical devices?
No, I don't know of any source for testing like that. I've tried using the built-in testing tools, both Unity's and Apple's. I don't even like Apple's simulator. So I've just used physical devices, and I literally pounded the pavement. In this case, it was only iPhone, so that made it way easier, right? Android, you have a large variety of object or phones to test from. So with Apple at the time, I only had, I think there was 3 generations. There was the iPhone 5S, 5 up to the 7 Plus. And I happened to know people that had one of each. So I pounded the pavement. It would have saved me time if I could have found a good simulator, but I never was happy with any of them. Does George know of any? I know George has done some mobile VR. Yeah.
So from your previous collaborations with researchers, whenever you work with somebody, did they usually use something that is stationary, like the Vive, and like really high powered, or does it usually go more towards the mobile VR? Like, how much of the work did you do with researchers?
That's a great question. The question is how much work have I done with researchers that was mobile VR versus desktop VR? Is that,
you, I mean, like
the whole AVL? So now it gets more complicated. I would say we've done more mobile, right? I don't know. That's a good question, Andreas. Me personally, the most recent VR project I worked on was definitely mobile. It was a spherical image viewer, not unlike the one you saw there, with a couple of recording features. And it was a nurse that's taking it into people's homes they're bedridden and they can't go anywhere. And she's analyzing how it changes their mood, how it helps them feel connected with nature and things like that. And then I already mentioned Dave's work with A-Frame. Have you done other A-Frame development? And I would call those both mobile. The rest of them I'm going to say are desktop, and I think those are far more numerous than mobile VR. Those are going to be, I've done probably 5 or 6 different custom architectural walkthroughs, and then you know about Prospect Pro, so I think desktop is ruling that area right now. Yeah.
I think it would relate to your goals are certainly outreach and something where you have or like mobile device, obviously, if it's for internal use, if it's someone collaborating research labs, probably the ease and the power that you get something like technology station is going to be the way to go. Thank you. Any of that?
No, it's too much.
Bring up the chat, George.
Oh,
Answered your question.
he did. All right.
Bring your mouse to the bottom. Oh yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, it was on the board.
Is it on more?
Top of the thing on the board. I'll let you read the answer.
I think.
After continued.
Where do you see continued? Oh. Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. George's answer is, thank you for your answer. I've heard of our informatics department doing some native app QA services, but not for VR. I thought everybody could read it if it's on the screen. I'm sharing my whole screen.
Oh, actually, yeah, they can.
Yeah. Well, you just made me look like a fool.
Actually, no, they can't.
They can't read the chat.
No, the chat is.
It's to everyone. Looking like the 3 Stooges of the ABL now. Any other questions? Okay.
You talked about gaze-based
Mhm.
super annoying because the
Mhm.
interaction is really slow.
Yeah.
Are controllers becoming more common?
So the question was, is gaze-based interaction ever going to go away, and are controllers becoming more available for mobile? The answer to the second one, mobile controllers, they're definitely becoming more and more common. Just from the Lenovo Mirage we have here, they have a decent controller. It's still a 3 degree of freedom. It guesses where you're at in space, but you can kind of point and interact with things. And I think it's okay. Now, if you jerk your hand out here, it might still think it's here. So that's the first progress I've seen in mobile VR. Then your second question was, is gaze-based interaction ever going to go away? I'm not going to say it's ever going to go away, but it is annoying. But I'm not going to say it's ever going to go away. I think it's going to be here for a little bit while longer. Yeah, I think it's a fallback. Yeah. All right.
Is there a way to detect the capabilities of the user and present them an appropriate interface for them?
That's a great question, and I probably don't have the answer. The question is, with my interactions with Apple, does the Apple system have the capabilities of detecting what is available to them? I'm going to take the easy way out and say, hell no, it's Apple. No, no, I don't know that they do or don't. I'm sure there's probably more in their system that I didn't explore that they're revealing. So I really didn't go down that avenue. Or Unity. Unity, yes. Yeah, Unity does have the capability of exposing whether or not you have 6 degrees of freedom, 3 degrees of freedom. But I don't know that it's as much of an active thing so much as just it happens, right? So if you've got 3 degrees of freedom or 6 degrees of freedom and you load it on a 3 degree of freedom device, well, then that's all you're going to get, because that's all you have anyway. So in the background, Unity is still supporting 6 degrees of freedom, but it has no input coming into it. So I don't know that it's a smart system so much as it's just, if you're going to send me 6 degrees of freedom information, I'll use it. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Something that I've seen in a few video games for VR is they use gaze, but not for very precise interaction with the interface, like selecting environment, but for just bringing up, bringing up a certain UI element. So I think that's actually a really useful way of using the gaze, because it takes away the annoyance of having to wait for 3 seconds. And it's
Yeah.
and it feels highly interactive by doing that.
It's
a very small use case.
So Andreas just pointed out that gaze is being used as an interaction inside of video games. And I do think that is a good use of gaze, where you bring up HUDs or it gives you clues is another one I've noticed. I played the game Ethan Carter, and it used gaze even on the keyboard and mouse mode. If you looked in a certain direction and the closer you looked, something got brighter and you knew you were supposed to go over there and look at it. So that's a good use of gaze, leading people into interactions or opening up a HUD. Yeah.
More of a question for Dave. Do web browsers or are things for the job trying to add that? What capabilities the viewing device has?
I think the web VR, like the browsing, that's technical. I think web VR does tell the browser what kind of and what the capabilities are. I don't think there are real system controls for listening to that message and presenting the correct interactions. So I think that's something that's still in development. I think we all asked it.
I think we could probably end the video feed, right? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Yeah.
The meeting.
Oh, they do?
But yeah,
Oh, well, I mean, I don't see any questions from the people online. We should release it.
spoke too soon.
No, I have no luck. The question is, any luck with adding 6 degree of freedom trackers to 3 degree of freedom mobile HMDs experience with devices like the Nolo VR? George, you know more than I do. No luck is my answer on that one. I have not explored that at all. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Oh, thanks.